Daniel woke before dawn in the cramped studio apartment he shared with Lily, gazing at the soft outline of her sleeping face. They had been living together in City A for 6 years, and in many ways, he still felt like he was catching his breath from those first days of falling in love with her. Every detail about her had seemed perfect then, her large, inquisitive eyes, her wry smile, her zest for life. He'd come from a smaller town and felt dazzled by her boldness, her independence, and her unstoppable ambition to succeed at her marketing firm. Over time, he had grown comfortable in her world, determined to support her as best he could, and convinced that their future would lead to marriage. Lily stirred in her sleep. Daniel, a freelance photographer, always liked to watch her in the mornings. That fleeting hush before the city's blaring traffic and clamor snatched them away. He couldn't count how many times he dreamed of proposing to her, maybe in a pristine rose garden or in front of an old cathedral at sunset. It didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that he loved her. He wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. He was so sure until Maxwell reappeared. The day Maxwell walked into Lily's office building was the day Daniel's world began to unravel. Lily came home late that evening, a haunted expression pinching her eyebrows together. She barely ate any dinner, shoving the food around on her plate, looking like she was swallowing back an ocean of memories. Daniel could see that something was wrong, her trembling hands, the glazed look in her eyes when she gazed out of the window. Finally, Lily explained. Her first love, Maxwell, had resurfaced in City A after supposedly vanishing abroad years ago. She had believed him to be gone for good. The confusion and longing in her voice as she tried to piece together what had become of Maxwell raised every alarm bell in Daniel's heart. But back then, he thought it was merely shock, an echo of old feelings. He had no clue that the foundation of their relationship, one he believed unbreakable, was about to collapse beneath him. Weeks turned into a bizarre labyrinth of emotional tension. Lily began spending long hours away from their apartment, meeting up with Maxwell and his friends. She didn't exactly lie about it, but nor did she admit the full truth, that her past feelings for Maxwell were reigniting like a dormant volcano. Each night Daniel questioned her whereabouts, but she only gave him superficial answers, never quite meeting his eyes. His concerns curdled into dread one afternoon when Lily's close colleague at the marketing firm cornered Daniel at a local cafe. "Look, I don't mean to meddle," she began, hesitating, "but Lily's been seeing Maxwell a lot. She's changed. I'm worried about her. And I'm worried about you, Daniel." Daniel felt a piercing ache in his chest. He wanted to refute any suggestion that Lily's affections were drifting away, but something about her colleague's anxious tone told him everything he needed to know. Indeed, an awful suspicion was brewing inside him, that Lily's love for him was not quite what he'd always believed it to be. Soon, the rumors intensified. Daniel overheard whispers in Lily's workplace. "He looks so much like Maxwell," some staffers would say, thinking Daniel couldn't hear. Or, "I always found it creepy how Lily replaced Maxwell with him." He didn't want to believe it. He loved Lily, believed in her goodness. They'd built a life together, hadn't they? But doubt clawed relentlessly at him. He began combing through old photos on Lily's laptop when she was out, noticing, with dawning horror, how many pictures of Maxwell she'd kept, how many times she would comment on his physical attributes that Daniel also happened to share. Then came the final blow. While scrolling through archived messages in a rarely used folder of Lily's email, Daniel found a conversation between Lily and a friend from years ago. In it, Lily confessed that she'd started dating Daniel not long after Maxwell disappeared, jokingly calling Daniel her very own Maxwell look-alike. Even more damning was Lily's admission of relief. At least she had someone by her side who reminded her of Maxwell as she waited for the real one to return. Daniel almost vomited from the pain. He'd poured 6 years of love and devotion into Lily, only to discover that in her eyes, he was always second best, a substitute for another man. Everything felt like a cosmic joke at his expense. The floor seemed to vanish beneath him, replaced by a whirlpool of betrayal and heartbreak. That night, Daniel finally confronted Lily. He tried to speak calmly, but his words trembled with hurt. He told her what he found in those emails, how destroyed he felt, how he needed answers. To his shock, Lily didn't deny it. She started to cry, first softly, then in great shaking sobs. She insisted she had grown to love Daniel in his own right, despite how it began. "Yes, I was drawn to you because you reminded me of Maxwell," she admitted. "But it's not that simple now. I never intended to treat you like a stand-in, but the truth is, I guess I did, at first. But I swear, I'm different now." Her tears scorched him, but they no longer had the power to soothe his wounds. The knowledge that the woman he loved had harbored this secret was too profound a betrayal. "I loved you from the depths of my soul, Lily," he said brokenly. "But you loved a ghost. You loved Maxwell, who was never here, never truly gone, always overshadowing everything we had." The conversation ended with Lily in tears, Daniel shaking in silent fury, and the echo of Maxwell's looming presence filling the space between them like a poisonous fog. In the days that followed, Daniel lived in a daze. He retreated to the confines of his makeshift photography studio, ignoring Lily's messages and the doorbell whenever she came by to see him. Despite the agony, he still couldn't pack up his things and leave. A part of him still loved her desperately, another part simply felt too shattered to make a move. It was in this dark pit of despair that Daniel received a call from his hometown, City C. His eldest sister, Sarah, rarely sounded so urgent. "Daniel," she began, voice gentle, "we know things have been difficult. Mom and Dad mentioned, well, they suggested you come home. They've spoken to Sabrina's parents about a possible arrangement." At first, Daniel was stunned. Arranged marriage? It felt so archaic, so out of step with the life he'd known with Lily. But the more Sarah spoke, the more Daniel found himself strangely comforted by the idea. Sabrina was the daughter of a respected family in their hometown, a woman known for her vivacious personality and unwavering loyalty to those she loved. Daniel had never met her personally. He'd been away too long, but his parents apparently believed that she could be the fresh start he so desperately needed. "Just come home and see for yourself," Sarah pleaded. "We can talk it over. This doesn't have to be forever if you don't want it. But Daniel, you can't keep letting yourself be hurt like this." Tears welled up in his eyes at the sound of his sister's concern. A wave of sorrow, mingled with relief, coursed through him. Perhaps going home would be the only way to heal. Perhaps it was time to leave this toxic entanglement behind. Out of a sense of finality, Daniel contacted Lily. She stood across from him in their apartment, eyes rimmed with red from endless crying. She offered up illusions of change, told him they could patch things up. But her phone chimed mid-sentence, revealing a text from Maxwell, and Daniel realized with a twisted kind of clarity that Lily couldn't truly let go of her first love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "I need to go," Daniel said softly. "I need to go home to City C. My family wants to arrange a marriage for me. I don't know what'll happen, but it's better for me than staying here." Lily's mouth opened in shock. She looked as if she was about to plead, but for once no words came out. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She took a step forward, as if to hug him, but he moved aside, heart pounding. Even though every inch of him ached to hold her one last time, he resisted. He was done being second best. So Daniel made the preparations. He packed his camera gear, the few clothes he owned, and some personal belongings into his battered suitcase. As he stepped onto the train platform the next morning, the sky was overcast, the city's skyline draped in a gray haze. The memory of Lily's anguished face lingered in his mind, but he forced himself to keep moving, step by step, toward the departing train. He felt numb but oddly relieved, as if escaping a long, suffocating nightmare. Little did Daniel know that Maxwell, newly reestablished in Lily's life, would soon unleash a wave of turmoil that would make Daniel's final days in City A living hell. But for now, as the train rumbled forward, Daniel only allowed himself one thought. He had to find a way to rebuild his life, far away from Lily and Maxwell. Despite the surge of determination Daniel felt when he decided to return home, fate had other plans. As he stepped off the train platform on what was supposed to be his route back to City C, he found himself confronted with the first hint of the chaos Maxwell was about to unleash. A message had flashed across his phone, a final plea from Lily to meet her one last time. Maybe he wanted closure. Maybe he didn't want to leave with everything unresolved. In any case, he relented, deciding to return to the studio apartment one more night before setting out for good the next morning. He had no inkling that a single day's delay could spiral into weeks of torment. Daniel opened the door to the apartment he once shared with Lily. In the dim light, he saw Lily waiting on the couch, eyes puffy from tears. She wore the same sweater he'd bought her for a past birthday, an item that once filled him with warmth and pride, but now reminded him of the staggering betrayal he felt. "I didn't want you to leave like this," she whispered, voice still cracked with crying. "Please, Daniel, just talk to me, let me explain." They ended up talking for hours, late into the night, revisiting old memories, regrets, and fleeting joys. Lily confessed that since Maxwell had come back, she felt torn between an ancient loyalty to him and the reality she'd built with Daniel. "I swear I never wanted to hurt you," she murmured, tears sliding down her cheeks. "But then Maxwell shows up, and it's like I can't help myself. I'm just so confused." Daniel's heart wrenched. There was a time he would have done anything to keep Lily from crying. Now, though, he was empty and drained. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he said quietly, not unkindly. "I just can't live like this anymore." For once, Lily didn't argue. She simply nodded, as if she knew her pleas had lost their power. When Daniel went to bed that evening on the small sofa, he felt a strange calm, almost like the eye of a storm. He didn't realize how quickly it would turn into a full-blown hurricane. The next morning, Daniel rose early, intending to avoid a lengthy goodbye. But as he slipped out of the apartment and headed down the street, a group of strangers approached him. Two young men, sporting backpacks plastered with stickers of Maxwell's name, blocked Daniel's path. He recognized one of them from social media, a fervent Maxwell fan who often spammed Lily's public posts with declarations of love for her original boyfriend. "You're the scumbag who stole Lily from Maxwell," the first one snarled, voice laced with fury. "We heard everything, how you manipulated Lily for 6 years, even though Maxwell was her real love." Shock rippled through Daniel. "That's not at all what happened," he began, but before he could defend himself, a fist cracked across his jaw. What followed was a whirlwind of hatred. The group grabbed his camera bag, rifling through its contents until they found his beloved DSLR, the one he had painstakingly saved up for. A second man smashed it to the concrete with brutal force. The lens shattered like brittle ice, and Daniel's heart clenched in horror. More kicks and punches rained down. Daniel curled into himself, arms protecting his head. He felt a hot sting of pain behind his eyes, a roaring in his ears that drowned out the jeering and laughter. By the time they scattered, Daniel was left gasping in the alleyway, bruises forming along his ribs, camera equipment strewn around him in pieces. One of them spit on him before leaving, whispering, "Stay away from Lily and Maxwell. This is just the beginning." In the aftermath of that shocking attack, Daniel struggled to function. Desperate for help, he staggered back to the apartment, only to find Lily missing. He called her repeatedly, voice trembling with fear and adrenaline, but she didn't answer until hours later. When she finally returned home, Daniel explained through split lips and labored breathing what had happened. Lily seemed horrified at first, her eyes wet with alarm. "But Maxwell would never allow something like this," she muttered, as though trying to convince herself. "It can't be him behind it, maybe just a few crazy fans. I'll talk to Maxwell, get him to calm them down." Reluctantly, Daniel agreed to wait and see if Maxwell would rein in his extremist admirers. Days passed, however, and the harassments continued. Strangers followed Daniel on the street, filming him or hurling insults. His phone buzzed with anonymous threats. One night, when Lily was out, Maxwell's fans cornered Daniel in a hotel lobby downtown. They dragged him into a bathroom, locked the door from the inside, and beat him mercilessly until he fainted. He woke the next morning slumped against the cold, tiled floor, feeling more like a hunted animal than a human being. Lily found him there only after a hotel cleaner discovered him. When she arrived, shaken and teary, Daniel noticed something strange. She was hesitating, as though unsure whether to hug him or question him. It was as if Maxwell had planted doubts in her mind, making her wonder if Daniel had somehow provoked these attacks. That small flicker of distrust in her eyes destroyed any lingering illusions Daniel might have had about repairing their relationship. He realized, with numb acceptance, that Lily was more concerned with justifying Maxwell's innocence than in believing Daniel's every word. Before Daniel could gather the courage to finally leave, Maxwell himself decided to confront Daniel, though not face to face. Instead, Maxwell staged a dramatic public reunion with Lily at a nightclub in City A. Paparazzi and fans swarmed them, capturing images that would plaster tabloid covers the next morning. In the articles, Maxwell let it slip that Lily was finally free from the manipulative relationship she'd been stuck in. The narrative turned completely on its head. Suddenly, Daniel was painted as a jealous imposter who had latched onto Lily only because he looked like Maxwell. People took Maxwell's words at face value, sending waves of vitriol Daniel's way. His few photography clients canceled shoots, claiming they didn't want the scandal. In the weeks that followed, Maxwell's cruelty escalated. Whether he directly commanded his fans to terrorize Daniel or merely hinted that Daniel deserved revenge for stepping into Maxwell's shoes, the result was the same. Daniel found hateful graffiti scrawled near his studio, received piles of nasty messages, and was physically attacked on at least 2 more occasions. One night, a car clipped him as he crossed the street. He landed hard on the pavement, scraping both arms and nearly cracking a rib. It was a hit and run, and the driver was never identified. Through it all, Lily appeared torn, but failed to stand firmly by Daniel. "I don't know what to believe," she confessed one night when Daniel showed up outside her office building covered in bruises. She touched his arm gently, eyes swimming with guilt. "I tried talking to Maxwell, but he denies everything. He said you're stirring up drama to get my attention." Daniel stared at her, bitter tears threatening to spill. Did Lily honestly think he would do this to himself? That he would break his own camera gear, orchestrate his own beatings, just to compete with a man whose shadow he'd lived under for years? The betrayal of that doubt stung worse than any physical wound he'd received. "You know what?" Daniel spat softly, feeling exhaustion seep through his bones. "I'm done, Lily. Truly done. I can't take another day here. My life's being destroyed before my eyes, and you won't even fight for me. You want Maxwell. Fine. Keep him. But I'm leaving." She opened her mouth to protest, tears welling again, but Daniel walked away. As he hobbled down the sidewalk, each step a flash of pain, a single thought rang in his mind. I have no home in City A anymore. By the time Daniel booked his ticket to City C, he was bruised, limping, and emotionally shredded. However, the moment he arrived at the quaint train station in his hometown, his 2 older sisters, Sarah and Lucy, were there to embrace him. They gasped in horror at his wounds. Lucy, who was usually the more stoic sibling, openly wept at the sight of his battered face, while Sarah raged about the injustice done to him. "You're not going back," Sarah declared, arms folded as though daring Daniel to argue. "Don't even think about it. You belong here, with us." A sense of relief, a weighty kind of peace, flooded through Daniel's chest. For the first time in many months, maybe years, he felt safe. Later that evening, as he settled into his old childhood bedroom with its faded posters and the lingering scent of family meals drifting up from the kitchen, Daniel got another message from Lily, a barrage of texts and missed calls. He didn't open them. He couldn't. He needed space to heal, to breathe. In the following days, Daniel's parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins descended upon the family home to welcome him. They were outraged by his injuries and provided him with comfort and food, showering him with unconditional love. Slowly, Daniel began to regain a semblance of strength, enough at least to consider the possibility of moving forward with his parents' suggestion, the arrangement with Sabrina. Sabrina arrived at the family home on her motorcycle in a swirl of dust and roaring engines, making quite an entrance. Daniel, peeking out the living room window, felt his brow rise. She was nothing like Lily or the demure image he had constructed in his mind of an arranged fiancée. Sabrina removed her helmet, tossing her jet black hair over her shoulder, and marched right into the house with an aura of bold confidence. "Which one of you is Daniel?" she called out teasingly. When Daniel raised his hand, shyly stepping forward, Sabrina looked him up and down, taking in the bandages, the bruises. Instead of recoiling, she nodded as though accepting a solemn duty. "All right," she said, a trace of warmth touching her bright eyes. "Let's get you patched up properly, shall we?" Before Daniel could protest, she led him outside and insisted on carefully redressing his wounds using supplies from her motorcycle's storage compartment. "You should really see a doctor," she admonished gently. "But if you're anything like me, you hate fuss and prefer to do it yourself." Despite his lingering pain, Daniel found himself smiling for the first time in months. Sabrina's practical nurturing and straightforward attitude felt like a balm on his battered spirit. In a single evening, they discovered a surprising ease in each other's company. She teased him about his city slicker accent, and he teased her about being a motorcycle junkie. It was lighthearted, an emotional breath of fresh air he desperately needed. As the days passed in City C, Daniel recovered his health under Sabrina's watchful eye and his family's unwavering support. His parents gently reminded him that the formal engagement with Sabrina could be sped up or slowed down at his convenience. Surprisingly, Sabrina herself seemed perfectly comfortable with the notion of marrying Daniel, but only if he wanted to. "We can take our time," she said, tossing a sparkling grin in his direction one afternoon. They stood in the garden behind Daniel's childhood home, where late-blooming flowers cast a delicate scent in the air. "But I won't lie. I do like you, Daniel, and I'd be proud to be your wife, if that's what you choose." It was the first time in his life that Daniel felt truly chosen for who he was, not for a resemblance to someone else. His heart clenched with gratitude, and a glimmer of hope sparked inside him. Maybe this was how love was meant to feel, mutual, supportive, free of hidden ghosts. Yet City A was not done with Daniel. Rumors trickled in. Lily and Maxwell were now very public in their renewed romance. Some tabloids reported lavish parties in Lily's villa, with Maxwell celebrating his comeback. Other rumors claimed Maxwell had begun cultivating a disturbing cult of underage fans, luring them into questionable situations involving drugs and intimidation. Daniel shuddered, remembering the violence inflicted on him by those same obsessed followers. Sometimes Daniel wondered if Lily was aware of Maxwell's depravity. A part of him still worried for her, despite the pain she had caused. But each time those worries began to eat at him, he glanced over at Sabrina, who was busy cracking jokes with his sisters or tinkering with her motorcycle in the driveway. The mere sight of her soothed him. She offered him not only affection, but the promise of a future untainted by the nightmares that Maxwell seemed to spawn wherever he went. Finally, after a family discussion, Daniel decided to finalize the arrangement. In a small, intimate ceremony, they registered their marriage at City Hall. He stood next to Sabrina, feeling more at peace than he had in years. Her beaming smile and strong grip on his hand assured him that he was making the right choice. No more shadows of Maxwell or Lily, no more feeling like a stand-in. Now, he had a partner who truly saw him. On the day of their registration, Daniel's phone buzzed incessantly with calls from Lily. Word must have traveled quickly. He silenced the phone, not wanting anything to spoil this moment. Later, he caught a glimpse of Lily's messages, riddled with question marks, pleas for an explanation. But Daniel steeled himself. His life was no longer tethered to Lily's confusion or Maxwell's manipulations. Even so, a small voice inside him whispered that this was not the end of it. Lily's messages carried an urgency, a desperation that Daniel had never seen in her before. And if Maxwell was truly on a spiral of self-indulgence and growing violence, how long would it be before everything in City A imploded? For now, though, Daniel chose to focus on what was real and uplifting. Sabrina by his side, his sisters fussing over wedding details, and a sense that, for the first time, he was building a future untouched by Lily's painful secrets. The sun was inching toward midday as Daniel stood in the courtyard of his family's ancestral home, bustling with wedding preparations. Lanterns strung overhead swayed in the light breeze. Rows of chairs lined a makeshift aisle that led to a flower-strewn altar where he and Sabrina would exchange vows that very afternoon. To Daniel, everything felt surreal. He could hardly believe that just a few months earlier, he had been caught in a nightmare of violence and manipulation back in City A. Now, surrounded by the comforting presence of his sisters, parents, and Sabrina's equally supportive family, Daniel felt hope flourish inside him. For once, his life was stable. No more lurking shadows, no more heartbreak. Yet that morning, a jolt of unease had threaded its way through his thoughts. Lily had tried calling him again. He hadn't answered. Rumors said Maxwell's behavior had worsened. Illegal activities, drug-fueled parties, and underage fans streaming in and out of Lily's villa. Unsure what to believe, Daniel found himself pushing aside any lingering concerns, determined to focus on his wedding day with the woman who truly loved him. As guests began to filter in, Daniel was inside the house adjusting his white suit jacket when a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. A sleek black car screeched to a halt, scattering gravel across the courtyard. Lily stepped out, disheveled and obviously rattled. Her normally calm demeanor was frayed, her hair was tangled, her eyes puffy from crying or lack of sleep. She didn't seem to care that she was intruding on a private celebration. Her gaze honed in on Daniel, as though he were her last lifeline. "Daniel!" Lily called out, tears in her voice. She rushed forward and seized his arm before he could fully process her presence. The hush among the gathering families was instant, every eye snapping toward them. Sabrina, dressed in a simple, elegant white gown, stood near the altar, watching, confusion etched across her face. "What are you doing here?" Daniel asked, heart racing. He gently pulled his arm free, reluctant to make a scene but struggling to control the wave of old emotions flooding him. She swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "I need to talk to you. Please, it's important. Maxwell, he's out of control. I called the police, but he found out. He threatened me, threatened you. I had no one else to turn to." A thunderous silence stretched across the courtyard. Sabrina's parents exchanged worried glances. Daniel's sisters rushed to his side, protective as ever. Someone's toddler started wailing, as if feeling the tension in the air. Daniel forced himself to remain calm. "Lily, I can't get dragged into Maxwell's mess again. I'm getting married. Today. This is my life now." Tears streaked Lily's cheeks. I know I don't deserve your help, but Maxwell's going to do something horrible. I just know it. He's furious you left, and he's convinced you're the reason I turned him into the police." Her words tumbled out in a trembling rush. "He vowed to show up here. I came to warn you." No sooner had the words left Lily's mouth than the screech of another car echoed down the driveway. A dark SUV barreled through the open gate, nearly plowing into an arrangement of fresh chrysanthemums. Several guests jumped back, frightened yells and gasps rippling through the crowd. The car door swung open, and Maxwell emerged. Gone was the charming aura that had once captivated Lily. He looked drawn, frantic, eyes bloodshot, as though fueled by substances and the heat of his own rage. Behind him loitered two of his most fanatical followers, their postures exuding menace. "Daniel!" Maxwell shouted, voice edged with fury. He swept his gaze over the wedding decor, the families, the bride. A twisted sneer marred his face. "So this is your big, happy day, is it? Thought you could just waltz off and forget me? Forget Lily?" Fear flared through Daniel's chest. He felt Sabrina's hand press into his back, steady and reassuring. Lily, trembling at his side, looked as if she wished she could vanish. Before Maxwell could cause more chaos, Sarah, Daniel's eldest sister, boldly stepped forward. "You have no right to be here," she snapped, pointing a finger at Maxwell. "Leave now, or I'm calling the police." Maxwell's two sidekicks took a menacing step forward. One of them reached into his jacket pocket, and the sight of a dull metal glint made Daniel's stomach lurch. A gun. He could scarcely believe it. Someone had actually brought a weapon to a family home on a wedding day. Time seemed to slow. Several guests shrank back, wide-eyed. Lily let out a frightened cry, nearly buckling at the knees. In a surge of protective instinct, Daniel darted between Maxwell's henchmen and Lily, arms outstretched as though to shield her. Sabrina, unflinching, did the same, determined not to abandon Daniel's side. "Don't you touch her!" Daniel hissed. A shot rang out, splitting the air. For one horrifying second, everyone froze, heartbeat suspended in sheer terror. Daniel felt a searing pain slice across his left arm. He stumbled, dizzy with shock, and nearly collapsed. Blood stained the sleeve of his wedding jacket. Panicked screams broke out. Someone frantically called the police. Daniel's vision wavered. The courtyard spun. He heard Sabrina shouting his name, felt Lily's desperate grip on him. Maxwell was yelling, "This wasn't supposed to happen," as he scuffled with his own accomplices. Then, with sirens blaring in the distance, Maxwell and his followers scrambled back to their SUV, tires screeching as they fled. Guests rushed forward to help Daniel, who lay against the garden's cobblestone path, hand clamped to his bleeding arm. His mother was sobbing uncontrollably, and Sabrina's tear-filled eyes were blazing with both terror and fury. Lily hovered nearby, pale and trembling, racked with guilt. It was a horrifying, chaotic end to what should have been the happiest moment of Daniel's life. Paramedics arrived quickly, loading Daniel onto a stretcher. Despite the throbbing agony, he turned his head to see Sabrina fighting to climb into the ambulance with him. "I'm coming," she insisted, voice hoarse. "I'm not leaving you now. Not ever." Lily stood at the edge of the yard, paramedics momentarily checking the bruises on her arms. She looked utterly devastated, horror etched into every line of her face. Her lips formed one word: "Sorry." Daniel caught her eye, just briefly, before the ambulance door shut, sirens wailing as they tore down the road. Inside, Sabrina grabbed his free hand. Daniel's vision threatened to fade. All he could see was her unwavering determination and love. Then the darkness took him. For a brief time, everything hung in the balance. Daniel underwent emergency treatment in the hospital. The bullet had grazed his arm dangerously close to a major artery. An inch closer, the doctor said, and it would have been fatal. The tragedy could have ended there. A wedding day drenched in blood, a groom lost in a senseless act of violence. But within hours, the outlook took a miraculous turn. The surgery was successful. Daniel stabilized, and by the next day he was awake, groggy but alive. His arm would need time to heal, but he would make a full recovery. Relief washed over everyone who loved him, particularly Sabrina, who practically refused to leave his side, and Lily, who arrived later in a tear-stained state of remorse. "They've arrested Maxwell," Lily whispered in the hospital corridor, trembling with the aftermath of her ordeal. "I helped the police, gave them every bit of evidence about his parties, the illegal stuff, the underage fans, everything. They're taking it very seriously." She paused, fiddling with the edge of her sleeve. "He'll be facing serious prison time." Daniel listened, subdued. He was still in pain, but a profound exhaustion and a strange, unexpected relief mingled in his chest. Lily's words meant Maxwell wouldn't be able to harm anyone else or come after Daniel again. At last, that toxic shadow was gone. Though guilt weighed on Lily, tears kept pooling in her eyes. Daniel managed a soft, distant nod. "Thank you," he murmured. "I hope this sets you free too." Even with Daniel in the hospital, no one was about to let tragedy define his wedding to Sabrina. Within a week, his condition had improved enough for the doctor to approve a small makeshift ceremony right there in the hospital's tranquil garden. Family and friends gathered among potted flowers and the hum of hospital machinery. Sarah and Lucy helped Daniel, bandaged arm and all, into a tailored vest that fit around his sling. Sabrina wore her white gown again, tears brimming in her eyes as she kissed his forehead. In a hushed, heartfelt moment, they exchanged their vows. The memory of gunfire and blood on the cobblestones lingered in everyone's thoughts, yet the love radiating from them cast a warm light that banished those dark images. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, a gentle applause rose from the small assembly of nurses, siblings, parents, and close friends. Lily stood in the back, discreetly wiping her tears and keeping her distance. This was not her place anymore, and she knew it. Yet she stayed to watch, grateful that Daniel had survived and found the real love he deserved. The guilt and remorse in her heart would take a long time to soothe, but at least she could see him safe and happy from afar. Time moved forward, as Daniel settled into married life. Months later, his and Sabrina's families gathered again, this time in a bright, cheerful hall decorated with pastel balloons and a banner that read, "Welcome, baby Amelia." The sweet giggles and coos of a newborn filled the air. Daniel, cradling his tiny daughter in his arms, looked every bit the devoted new father. Sabrina beamed by his side, leaning on her husband's good shoulder. Not long after Daniel's release from the hospital, Lily had returned to City A with a newfound resolve. She secured her marketing firm, testified in Maxwell's trial, leading to a lengthy prison sentence for him, and methodically hunted down the fans who had attacked Daniel, bringing suits against them to ensure they faced real consequences. In doing so, she finally broke free from Maxwell's toxic grip, channeling her regret into a pursuit of justice. And now, she had come to City C with an unexpected honor. Daniel and Sabrina had chosen her to be baby Amelia's godmother. It was a surprising gesture, a kind of healing note that bridged their painful past and offered a cautious path forward. Lily stood by the cradle, carefully lifting Amelia with shaking hands. The baby gurgled happily. "You trust me with her?" Lily asked quietly, tears swimming in her eyes. Daniel nodded, a gentle smile warming his face. "We do," he said, his voice steady. "We're all trying to move on. This is the best way, for everyone." A hush of understanding passed between them. Their once intense bond, marred by betrayal, was now something else, distant but civil, perhaps even affectionate in a bittersweet way. Lily gave the infant the softest smile, silently pledging to watch over her godchild with all the... As the one-month celebration wound down, guests trickled out into the warm evening. Lily lingered a moment longer, exchanging a quick, tight hug with Daniel and Sabrina. Their baby was falling asleep in Sabrina's arms, lulled by the calm energy flowing between all three adults. Finally, Lily stepped away, a small, grateful smile lighting her features. "Congratulations," she whispered. "On everything." She offered a polite nod to Daniel's parents and sisters, then turned and disappeared into the balmy night. For the first time since Maxwell's reappearance, Lily wore a look of peace, as if some burdens had lifted. When Daniel closed the door, Amelia stirred, releasing a tiny cry of protest. Sabrina rocked her gently, laughter dancing in her eyes as she passed the baby to Daniel. He nestled his daughter against his chest, inhaling her sweet scent. The tragedy of the wedding day felt distant now, overshadowed by hope, love, and new life. In that single precious moment, Daniel understood that sometimes the darkest storms could give way to the brightest mornings, and that healing, though painful, was indeed possible for them all.